Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 67 of the NTS Podcast. We're here with Josh, formerly of Excel, obviously a team most people probably know you from, and now an
We could
agent.
list all the teams off, couldn't we? But we might be here for the rest of the
Yeah,
podcast.
but yeah,
It's been a while, yeah.
I actually was watching before this. I forget what the name of the channel was now, which is going to make me feel bad. But an interview I think you did quite recently, with it was something esports. I feel like actually
There's a next level esports
that was
interview
the
that I did
yes.
like last week or something.
That was one, and yeah, I just noticed it when it was saying like you've been coaching for like 7 years, and I was like, surprised. I didn't even realize it'd been that long. Which it's
yeah,
yeah,
no,
pretty
I mean, I
crazy.
think that's probably even. I mean, it was definitely before that as well, but it was very much on an unofficial capacity. You know, like groups of
Yeah,
friends that were playing League of Legends that I was like working with, very loosely say working with, but I think organized teams. Yeah, it's probably been about 7 years.
yeah, blimey. And yeah, we were just talking obviously off stream that we've been doing the podcast for a couple of years now, and it feels like you are like one of the most overdue guests. As yeah, someone that's like been in the UK scene the whole time and somehow never actually arranged it. So we thought, it's a Monday night. There's been a pretty uneventful weekend. No one's really had much to do, so we'll have you on and we'll have a chat and try and think of things to talk about because, like we say, nothing really big has happened, at least in the last couple of days.
No,
Maybe let's start off then with a bit about your time in Excel then, which, like I said, it's probably like it's definitely the team you spent the longest on. I think if I'm right, thinking even like over a couple of spells as well.
yeah.
And one thing I wanted to focus on was the actual process of when Excel got into the LEC, because from what I think you said on interviews and things, that you obviously had a part in it as well, and that was something that goes into it. But I feel like even just that kind of application process for just sort of fans seeing about the teams getting accepted and things. I suppose a bit of a mystery what the process actually is. What
Sure.
does a team actually do? Especially someone like Excel, who at the time you would not have thought was a team that was anywhere near getting a chance, given
No,
how
yeah.
the
I
size.
mean, they were they were slightly bigger than some of the other UK orgs at the time. I mean, they were on the level of kind of the M&Ms and maybe I don't know, you could class them slightly bigger than maybe Barrage or Enclave or something like that at the time. But they certainly hadn't had anything about Excel that was LEC at that point, right? The application process is a very long and tedious one. In the sense of there are effectively, so it was actually quite rushed with what Riot wanted to do. So they changed from the old EULCS format to the LEC. Incomes, they call it long-term partnership, but effectively means franchising. And it was almost an open route to application for teams that want to apply. Back from that, you get effectively the subheadings of what they want you to talk about in your application. Stuff like where you're going to get your money from, stuff like what's your performance kind of plan and pathway, how are you gonna create and develop LEC ready talent, talk about the academy system and what you want to do with your particular academy system, sponsorships, how you're going to generate revenue, how you're going to make this a business, and so on. I mean, there's I don't know, probably 50 different subheadings amongst the application. Ultimately, when application comes around, the end is you end up with a massive kind of dissertation, couple hundred page book or something of your actual application for your particular team. The bit that I was directly involved with or directly tasked with was anything performance effectively. So that comes from kind of performance, the facilities, the performance-based facilities, and designing them, and what I thought within the confines of whatever money we were going to be able to put in, what did an ideal performance facility look like for a League of Legends developing team, how we were going to develop both the LEC team and the academy team, any kind of performance model, structure, development model for the players. Ultimately, that was my task. So it was quite a big one, and the issue with that I had, I guess, was that it wasn't that I was solely focusing on that. We were also playing throughout summer split. I mean, the applications process started in May, but we were playing summer split while it was myself and John Ellis, who was effectively my assistant coach at that point, throughout from May all the way till November, when XL finally got actually into the LEC. Our number one priority became doing the LEC application. That even ourselves, we honestly didn't think that XL would get into the LEC when we were sat there writing it, so and obviously we don't know any of the other applications. We didn't see any of the other applications or anything like that. It's only Riot that sees that. So we did the best job we possibly could of creating a performance structure and model that we believed would be fit and ready to go for what would be an LEC team should XL get accepted. So yeah, I mean, a massive thing for sure.
Was it I want to see kind of what your thought on the fact of I think a lot of people expected different European regions to be represented throughout the entirety of the LEC. That was probably a given, that you would have like a representative from like Spain, Germany, the UK. Do you think that it made it a little bit harder for you guys, possibly with the fact that Fnatic were already kind of like what was seen as like a UK representative? And I mean, I guess you could say Misfits at one point, because obviously they were there. But like, how did that thought come in? Thinking, well, already the fact of the matter is you got Fnatic and Misfits. Is it going to be a little bit harder for us?
I think there was a bit of talk. Even I remember just kind of, it was probably Misfits' last split as Misfits Academy in, I guess it was Forge of Champions or something then.
Yeah.
At that point under the LVP UK. I think there was talk that they were not going to be in the UK scene after that. There was mutters or rumors of that. So I think we weren't too worried about that, and we always felt that because Fnatic had never competed in the actual ecosystem of the UK League of Legends, while they can be based wherever they want, it's not as authentic as one of the UK brands that basically the inception of the organization was playing at the grassroots level of League of Legends in the UK, and has done that every single split up until the date that they apply for LCS or LEC. But yeah, I think it almost felt like it's never been done. Prior to that, all of the EU LCS teams we'd never really seen compete in an ERL, right? That they were all just LCS teams. There was the Spices, the G2s, the Fnatics. All of these teams had never had. There was some that were starting to get inception of kind of academies that they were an LCS team or an LEC team. They had an academy team and they put it in an ERL, but they never started in an ERL and then moved their main team up through to the LEC or tier 1 competition, basically. So I don't think we were too concerned about the regional competition, and I think it was, from an organization's point, this definitely wasn't my side of things. The side of things obviously was I was very much performance, so it really didn't matter to me what the region was so much. But for the application to succeed, it needed to feel like we were truly representing the UK, and I think that's what XL's kind of motto was, or really was at the start. And there was where it overlapped into starting to play into the performance side was that we were going to try and recruit best in class British talent, and that's where we started to look at the likes of Alfari, Maxlaw, Cadrel, Kasing at the time, and ultimately we did in the first LEC roster of XL, there was Cadrel and Kasing, right, as a core UK duo, whatever. So that's where it seeped, the kind of identity of the region seeped into XL LEC, is that, and seeped into the performance side of things, is that we were under some constraints to sign UK players.
So is that
internally anyway?
So even like to that level is, I suppose, is something in the like in the application then. So you can even like go to that detail, like outlining like we look to have like the UK talent.
So we had within the performance sector specifically, there was how you're going to nurture and develop talent. There was your scouting process, so you had to effectively detail how you scout players, what type of players you're going to look at, what regions you're going to look at for your talent. They wanted to know all of this effectively, and
Isn't it
yeah,
just
we
you go
created a
on
scouting plan.
LOL Pros and just look at the ladder, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't. Low pros a thing? It might have been. It might have just started. But yeah. I mean, effectively, yeah. You just choose the highest LP person, and you say, "We'll have him, mate." Yeah, that's what I wrote in the application. Actually, I said, "Excuse me, Mister Riot. We'll just get the biggest LP gains off low pros and see who we go with."
Mm-hmm. Well, what did you have? Because we kind of mentioned a bit of here that one thing I wanted to touch on was when you got in the LEC, you guys had that like 10-man roster. Was that even something? Because from what I could tell, that am I right in thinking it was like mainly your philosophy about doing
Yeah,
that?
no, it's absolutely. And I mean, I'll give a bit of context to why. Um, the issue that I've had in League of Legends, that I have with League of Legends, I mean, there's a huge amount of issues actually we have with League of Legends in terms of practice and nurturing, developing talent. But one key one that I found throughout my career as a coach is that in traditional sports, you will have players who nobody can be driven and motivated 100% of the time, and players would turn up to practice and they would be perhaps unmotivated and or not feeling it that day, or not feeling great, or whatever the reason is, multitude of different reasons. They have an off day, an off week, an off 2 weeks, whatever, and they're not playing particularly well. In a traditional sport, you say you have people behind that starter who are chomping at the bit and would do anything for a chance to play, and they're effectively working their backsides off to be able to play in their game at the weekend. There's a game coming up at the weekend, and they're showing you every single day in training that why they should start instead of their kind of teammate, right? We can talk about football as you had a horrible experience last night or whatever, but there's the Sanchos and Sakas of the world. There's Phil Foden's trying to get into the team, and they're meant to give the coach or the manager, whoever's picking the team, selection headaches, and good ones, because you've got multiple players in different roles, or within the same role, that you're choosing the best in class of. So that's effectively the plan, right? The plan was that we would have more than capable players, keeping the experience of some of the old guard, hopefully teaching some of the younger players what it is to play at an LEC level, both in game and actually like the nuances of the game to a higher level, and what they need to know. While there was a lot of hunger, motivation, and such behind some of the younger, biting at the tails to say, if you don't keep playing to the highest possible level, there's people that will come in. And it was very clear, and the way we signed the 10 players was very clear, that you're not gonna start in the LEC every week if you're not up to scratch. If you're not working your ass off, you're not going to be starting next week. There will be it's very fluid. Effectively, was the point. It's not going to be two completely separate teams. We are signing you as our LEC starter, but effectively that doesn't mean you start every single game all split, no matter what the consequences is. Because I've had scrims before, I've had weeks before where there is no repercussion for just like there's 5 players on the team, and if someone just is not feeling it that week, there's no repercussion really, other than like having a word with them and say like, what's going on, for just not putting your all in. And when you see other people putting their all in, and then one person's getting away with like just slacking a bit, it feels what often happens is the one person that's not trying doesn't go, oh, actually, maybe I should try much harder. What happens is like, why should I try if that guy's not trying? A lot of the time, and you get slumps in teams. So to combat that was the strategy. It's really, really hard to get that across publicly, and perhaps more content content can do better jobs of actually like engaging fans with a philosophy and what that actually is all about. But I think there's lots of buzzwords in esports that have become buzzwords that don't really mean anything, like 10-man roster, and what they actually mean is they're going to have 2 teams. But that was really not what the plan was with XL. There were constraints within XL because of the situation that really made it really difficult to do that in my LEC split there at XL. Such as, I mean, the main one was we signed Expect, or Dahan. He effectively had a visa to work in Germany, but needed a separate visa to work in the UK. The plan was that we were all going to be based in the UK together, and the 5 players that we felt were performing best would scrim in the LEC room. The 5 players that we thought were performing at a lesser level would play in the would be playing in the academy room, right? They would be scrimming the RL scrims, one team would be scrimming LEC scrims, and that can change from day to day based on performance. The issue was that to all work in the UK, people that were non-European, which was Dayhan at that time, didn't have a UK visa, only a German visa, and as a result could not work in the UK. So that meant that the plan that was to work in Twickenham altogether, all 10 players, could not happen. The options at that point that were presented to me were Dayhan has to work in Germany to play on a US. He's either in Korea or he's in Germany. That's the options. He doesn't have a visa for anywhere else in Europe. We're going to get a visa. We're going to fast track it as fast as possible. But ultimately, right now, he needs to play from Germany. The options were he lives in Germany on his own, and the other 9 players are in the UK. So the system really struggles at that point already. In talking to the team and conversation amongst staff, we felt the best way to combat this was, in the meantime, until there's a visa, have what we believe to be the best 5 currently out in Germany with him. So the 4 players plus him, and the 5 academy players stay back in Twickenham and train Twickenham. The issue with that became when everything that I'd sold to the players about a 10-man roster now became really difficult. For instance, I made the decision to bench Kasing because I didn't think he was performing at a high enough level alongside Jessica in that LEC split. And it just felt so bad that he had to just pack his stuff up in the house in Berlin, get on a flight back to the UK. Mystiques at that time packed his bags, was really happy to be coming out to Berlin to join up with the rest of the team to play. But the motivation and the demoralization was so rough that we just weren't connected as a 10 players, and we weren't connected as staff either. The plan was the academy coach would work very closely with us as well, so that we were all kind of one cohesive unit. But it separated the units massively.
Was it like a bit of like a mental thing as well? Because it's like I think because of physically being booted out into one house into another does just feel like you've just been evicted, doesn't it?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Must
I mean,
just going from one room to
right.
another. It's like you have that more dialogue, don't you? You can
Yeah,
kind of say, like,
I mean,
you're
the
only going to
plan
be there
was
for a couple of days. Yeah.
the plan's to come in the morning, and I go, okay, Kasing, you're playing in the academy today, and you're playing in the LEC team, and it's just literally just like you take your keyboard and you put it in that room, right? But that's very different than getting on a flight, losing half a day, traveling back to somewhere where you don't really want to go, joining up with a team that you don't really want to play on, and having to play that week in a league you don't want to play in. And that was the issue. But it was really like, outside of just not having the ability to change the roster around, which I could have done. I could have gone like, look, okay, we're not going to make any changes this split, and this is where it's standing. In hindsight, maybe I should have done that. It became a very difficult dynamic to get right. I think, yeah, I mean, it scuppered plans massively. I think it was no one's fault. It was just that there was way too much to get ready. XL was the last team to get into the LEC, and that was off of the fact that one of the we got a reserve spot, right, to get into the LEC. Our team didn't make it. We got in. That right, it was like, if you can get the funds together and you get everything that you said in the application together in like 2 days, you can you're in the LEC. And it's like, okay, well, great. So XL had nothing, right? They had 5 players contracted to the end of that year, which at the time was the Sendo, Taxa, who do we have mid lane? Rippy, Venza, Quickseth roster. These players ran out of contract, so we had no players. XL had no players. They didn't have a facility, no facility at all. And this was November. The league started in January. XL had to have a facility in Germany, a facility in England. They had to sign 10 players. I had to somehow convince 10 players that were LEC level or as near to as possible to come play for XL rather than the other offers that they're getting in the LEC with teams that are already established, like Fnatic, XL. I mean, all of the other teams, even the other one that got in late, which was Splice, they were previously an EU LCS team. So they had a house in Berlin. They had all the experience of doing all of that. So it was a completely fresh start for us, and very, very difficult to get what we wanted to together in that period of time. I mean, it was impossible to get what we wanted to together in that period of time. And effectively, to do it right for the first split, we would have just had to slot into a very basic, like, this is our 5-man team. We probably bit off more than we could chew too quickly. But I think at the time, the plan was that everybody knew it was going to fail for a split or two for longer term success. Or that's the hope.
I feel like what you're saying about like content and kind of like pushing that to actually get that narrative across, I think that would have been like extremely vital because I was just coming into like the UK scene at that point. So from the outside looking in, all I was seeing was like essentially what it felt like demotions, and I
Yeah,
think with what was kind of happening, I remember when you saw some of these LEC players kind of step down, like Kissing and vice versa with the others. And then when they performed at the ERL level, it always felt like they were just doing the motions and they weren't there to kind of push themselves more. But if I knew that actually this thing about two bases, essentially, it was meant to be one, you can kind of see why they were just at that point playing in the
and it felt
motions.
so sad, right? Because like I'd watch our UK team play, and effectively I wasn't the coach of the UK team. We had a separate coach, and I'd watch the team play, and like say Singh was playing or Exile dropped down also from the LEC team to the academy, and there would be like UK people like within like Twitch chat and stuff like saying, "Oh my god, this guy's so bad. He's not even playing well at a UK level and stuff like that." And I'm like, this guy's just flown from Germany to a team he doesn't want to be in because I've just like sacked him off, effectively. And it was, I mean, it felt really bad. Like, of course he's not going to perform. Of course this isn't going to be season 6 Kasing or whatever absolutely popping off in ERLs. But what you saw of Mystiques was tearing people apart. And I think when you do make massive roster changes like this, it does benefit the LEC roster, and the academy rosters do sacrifice, right? So we're even looking at like BTXL right now. Dan and Denick have just dropped down to
Yes.
the
Yeah.
BTXL roster, and they look like a completely different team. But these are LEC players you've just given them. Perhaps they don't want to be there. You know what I mean? It's really, really hard to just like sink into that. Whereas I think teams take benchings as kind of final way too much in esports, whereas like nobody nobody cares really that like Grealish was coming on in the 70th minute, and he's not like, I'm not going to play because I don't get onto the 70th minute. It really has to, in the kind of longevity of League of Legends, become more of a squad sport rather than a just 5-person starting sport. I think for teams to work, I think in League of Legends we really haven't worked out how to incorporate more than just the 5 players that are playing to a team environment very well at all.
I think as well, it's what's very interesting is the fact that it just felt a little bit too like early in the way that I think people perceived like 5-man and 10-man rosters, because felt like it either felt like you were doing it because you didn't have faith in like the 5 men which were there, or you were doing it because the team isn't strong enough to have a 5-man team, where it's not like that anymore. And I hate to shout out the LCS because it's the LCS, but they are introducing, still not perfect, but introducing a system where if they do well in academy, they will then play a game in the LCS. And we saw it with Evil Geniuses, with Svenskeren and contracts being put, which was most effective. So we're starting to see it a little bit over there, where we are seeing kind of these roster moves, and sometimes they are done in a PR-y way of like, we're going to give this player a chance, but then sometimes it is a reward system. And when it becomes more of a reward system and people kind of get used to that, and teams get used to that, and more importantly the players get used to that, I think that's when it can start to become more beneficial and a lot more fun tactically to see. Because
Yeah,
at the end of the day, we're reaching a point where like certain junglers, like Dan and Marcoon, are completely different junglers. And in some days, like Dan could actually be a perfect player to play against this team if you want to play a certain style of League of Legends. And Marcoon obviously a lot more aggressive. So if you could get these players working, gelling together, that's such a beneficial thing to have during a game as well.
yeah. No, I mean, I think the part of the difference between kind of traditional sports and League of Legends as well is that in League of Legends, meta dictates what is good, whereas in a traditional sport, say, I don't know, say I'm recruiting a new centre back, like I look at a set of skills that I'm picking up that centre back for, and I pick up that centre back because he best fits into my team. Whereas in League of Legends, I pick up a mid laner because he's the best mid laner overall. But next week, like, he's the worst mid laner because now we're playing Set and Lee Sin mid. He's a brilliant Orianna Victor player, right? And you're trying to you're trying to plug a round hole with a round stake, but ultimately the hole's a square next week. So all of a sudden it doesn't fit, and that's where it's really, really difficult. And that's where having a squad of players allows you to not just have one true team identity, but actually be able to play tactically with your squad as well. You could have various different skill sets within the same role. So I think it's definitely beneficial. It's really hard to do right. The backlash publicly, because they don't know enough about what's going on internally, becomes quite a lot to deal with. But yeah, I mean, really, it's about getting that context across to the public while also knowing that the public only see the stage game that week. They see 2 games. You see 6 games a day. They see 2 games in a whole week. And that's the real difference. So.
And I think I see that difference with, for example, with what happened with Excel right recently. So because Excel have got the results of that, and they've said, actually, we've been trialing this thing and working out what the 5-1, and we didn't want to jump the gun straight away. I mean, if they had lost then 3 games afterwards, like there would have been a massive backlash saying, "Oh yeah, of course you've done that," but because then they ended up winning and it proved to be successful. Obviously now people are like, "Oh, isn't that quite great?" And it caused the discussion of, "Oh, can we do things like that?"
There's so many knee-jerk reactions, right? Like literally dependent on how Markun and Naviem play that day determines how whether these are good roster swaps or not, which is just not accurate at all. I mean, what's to say that Markun hasn't flown just literally from the UK to Germany? He's just moved into a new house with 7 new people that he doesn't know. Why should he be playing his best on that day? He's really motivated for sure, and there's no doubt about his level of talent. But what's to say that day playing against G2, he should be the best player on the Summoner's Rift? You know what I mean? There's nothing to say that really, regardless of the level of roster swap. So I don't know. It's really tough. It's really tough to one, get it right, and then 2, get it right publicly. It's like trying to get them on side is a lot of the hard thing.
And I feel like, yeah, like some of those like knee-jerk reactions, so many times you feel like they can be just so fickle as well. Like the main example that I think of is probably the Checo lad one with Excel recently, and I think it's something when it's rookies that people that get benched, people are like even more overreactive. I think because he's saying you've got to give him a bit of a chance, but then when you like read into all the information that was available on the Checo lad one about how they tried to like send him home mid-split and stuff, and it just makes you think it's clearly not just his performances that are the reason for that. Like there must be a bit of something else. Like,
I would also say there
personality-wise.
needed to be more transparency between that. Like it
Yeah,
shouldn't have got to a point where it was leaked out that this thing would happen.
Yeah.
I feel like that got blown out of proportion because there wasn't like this transparency. And I can see the reasons for it, but at the end of the day, like you've got to be transparent in sometimes like that.
Based on what I know, what I saw of that kind of try to send him home, come back again, like that just for me is just incompetence on whatever level. The reason, the choice to bench him or to remove him from the roster or whatever, I literally can't comment on. I don't think anyone outside can comment on it, because literally any context within that you just don't know, other than you like Checolad or you don't. And if you like Checolad, then it's a bad move. If you don't like Checolad, it's a good move. But there's so much more to it than that, obviously, on the inside, that nobody outside should even know. Like, why should they know that? It's a choice by XL and by their staff that they think will benefit XL, and ultimately that's what the staff have to do. They need to be, what way is going to get us more wins in summer than we got in spring is that benching Checolad. I think the issue is that they commit too early to saying we're committing to the development of rookies for the long term, and then like half a split in, they're trying to send him home. Like, if you're trying to commit to rookies for the long term, even if he's not having a great split, okay, he's going to step down into academy and ply his trade a little bit more before he's ready to make that step up. We took that judgment that we was ready to step up to the LEC earlier than we perhaps thought. I think the vetting process of picking up players, and this is where we kind of go into scouting and such, is also in its very early stages in League of Legends. I mean, you can watch as many games of Checolad in ERLs as you want to over the previous splits before he got picked up. Great. I mean, he's certainly capable. What you don't know about Checolad is what is he like to live with? What is his personality like? Is he going to really mesh with the current crop of players that we've got here? And these are all things that kind of traditional sport scouting networks would work to find out. They would talk to previous teammates, previous coaches. I mean, of course, coaches do that now. They'll talk to previous teammates, previous coaches, and try and get references and such. But that can be a much more thorough system than it is at present, because ultimately it often falls on the job of coaches after their split is finished as an additional job in the off season, that they need to go and start scouting for players, as opposed to when they've got a skill set and they've got an eye for the game, they can see the player, but they don't really, they know what they're looking for. But I mean, I personally prefer a system that goes on throughout the split running, and something that's more thorough around looking at the personality of these types of players and
Mm-hmm.
whether that will fit. Because ultimately, a lot of the time, that's what it comes down to. And this word toxicity is I mean, there's been a lot of backlash around the kind of Alfari thing, and people like Checolad get branded with toxicity. It's really gauging what that means as well. You know, it's another buzzword that's used in esports for someone who effectively didn't get on with whatever system that they were placed into. But because someone doesn't get on with the system that they're placed into, does not make someone toxic, right?
Yeah.
And there's also a difference between team conflict, internal conflict, and toxicity, because I think conflict is healthy for a team environment, and breeding that and dealing with that in the right way and overcoming it makes you a stronger team. Benching that person or saying you don't agree with the way we want to play the game, you're out, is not necessarily a healthy way of dealing with that situation for me. But
I think that that's exactly what you're saying. I think that in terms of like there's a lot more, especially now as esports, in particularly Legends, is becoming a lot more of a like, it's always been a team game, but it's a lot more cohesion. It's not just about like player skill at this point when you're selecting a pro. It is about finding these players which mesh well together, which kind of have this same goal but have the same attitude together, and could kind of help each other from like a personal standpoint, a mental standpoint as well. Like, you know, and that all it means is like, right, for example, now like Checolad, yeah, could be absolutely brilliant now at Mouse. I'm really happy, you know, being a mid laner at Mouse. It's more of an atmosphere which he wants to be in than what he was at XL or vice versa, you know. And that doesn't mean that XL are bad. That doesn't mean that Checolad's bad. You know, it just means it just wasn't the right fit.
Yeah, they didn't work well together. And I mean, I think sometimes, like when you say helping, we also get that wrong. You know, like we think that a player helping another player is always like putting his arm around him and saying, "This is what you should do better." But sometimes it's pointing out that player and say, "Look, this ain't good enough. What you're doing there in this game is just like, it's literally losing us the game. It's not good enough." And then that person responds negatively, and all of a sudden, this toxicity that's toxic because there's an argument between teammates. But at the end of the day, they've got the same goal, and that goal is for the team to do better than they did yesterday. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's for the team to win. And while a team remains on that same page with the same shared goal, calling each other out, I mean, there's ways you can say certain things, but in the heat of the moment, people say certain things, right? And it can get people get labeled as well. People get labeled way too easily in esports, and labels that are not even true right now, but stick with them for multiple years. That again, we're kind of segueing into a different topic here for sure, but those kind of labels stick with players, and the scouting becomes, well, he got labeled this 2 years ago. I guess leader can still only play Zed. You know, like
I heard Matthew Felix chokes on
yeah, on
stage and
stage.
stuff
Yeah,
like that.
every
Yeah.
single game he chokes on stage. It's impossible to fix an issue in esports.
Mm.
Whatever issue you had at one point is the remainder of your career, apparently.
Yeah.
So
Especially that Metro Felix one, he won like 4 UK titles in a row, and he was like still seeing it on Reddit and Twitter and that he's a choker. It's ridiculous.
yeah,
5 accounts, like ranked top 5 in solo queue.
Yeah.
It's like,
One thing
yeah,
just on like the Checolad example as well, and I don't know if it's like a logistical problem, but I always wonder why there's not more like loans that happen in esports as well. Because if you think of in Excel's case where they've got Checolad, who is meant to be one of the best prospects in Europe in his role, and they decide they don't want him in their starting team, and they clearly don't want to demote him either because whatever they think that there could be issues or they don't want to disrupt BTXL at the time. I don't see why they wouldn't just try and maybe loan him out to another ERL team and
yeah. I
then
mean,
get him more
I
experience and
personally think
kind
they
of hold
should.
on to it.
I think some of it is the difference in levels of contract between LEC and the remainder of Europe. I mean, you're talking like uh, the the lowest players in the LEC, for instance, are probably on about 100k a year, like roughly, let's say 10k a month, and you're talking high-end ERL players are on like 3k a month, right? Like ish. Um, Very broad numbers, obviously, and there's teams that definitely pay more and less for both sides. But I mean, I think. I think recouping, I don't know, say mid between spring split and summer split, you actually still have Checolad under contract, because Checolad was contracted for 2 years, so that would have been from 2021 until 2023, right?
yeah, it
Yeah,
would
he
have
played
been.
spring,
Yeah.
so yeah, till 2023. So effectively, he's got like another 18 months on his contract or whatever. I personally think, I mean, one, when we talk about when we talk about agents, but it's too easy just for a team to terminate a contract, right? For not a lot, right? In esports, you don't have players terminated contracts in football, for instance. Very rarely is a player's contract terminated.
Unless it's something like really bad. Like,
yeah, unless they were like
really
overtly racist or something like this publicly, like of course. And there are codes of conduct that everyone has to follow in any job that you cannot just break, or your job will be terminated. But it's not okay in my eyes as an agent, from an agent standpoint, for a player just to lose his job because perhaps he wasn't playing very well for a few weeks, and as a result, you now have no income and you're unemployed. Of course, Cheglad can go on and get a new team or whatever, but that's not always the case. I found it really, really hard to get good coaching offers after my split in XLLEC, for instance, because there wasn't a lot of context around what went well, what went wrong. A lot of the issues that I felt were out of my control, what fell on my head. I definitely had my worst split as a coach during the XLLEC split. But again, that's not really the point. The point is that if a team can just terminate a 2-year contract 3 months in, you are left unemployed, effectively, all of a sudden, an unplanned unemployment, and you now have no income to pay the bills that you'd set up for. I mean, I got rent to pay, car to pay for, so on and so forth each month. That, I mean, we all have life things to pay for, but if you all of a sudden become unemployed for no fault of your own, really, other than perhaps you weren't playing as well as the other LEC mid laners, how bad does that feel? And I think that's, again, like the human aspect of the players that's missed, and of teams too. But going back to the original point, I think loans are a good way. If you commit to, we're going to develop a rookie, that rookie doesn't currently have a place in your LEC starting lineup because there is pressure on you to win, that if that player is not then going to play in your academy, that he is loaned to another ERL team or whatever, and they cover some of the costs of his contract while you pay the remainder. I think that's a good logistical way to get around a player being benched, quote unquote. And then at the end of his contract, yeah, of course, like, he's now a free agent. He can go where he wants. If he might have developed in that 18 months in ERLs or 12 months in ERLs and actually come back to you, and you go, okay, well, we don't need to buy it. We don't need to scout or buy a new mid laner. Actually, Checolad's really worked on the issues that we sent him away to try and work on. And he's now a new player to us.
Yeah. The only one I kind of remember which was a loan was in the NLC, actually, and it was Barrage and Nordavind where they got Ericsson, on a loan. And I think, I mean, not famously, but I very much said, I can't believe they've got a loan. This must be terrible. But in the end, it was actually, it worked out really good for Barrage. And obviously now Ericsson's still doing well for Nordavind as well. And that
he's
was
gone back to Nordavind, which I think is the cool bit, right? If they just got rid of him to Barrage for the remainder of the contract, and then he just like disappeared into the atmosphere, I think that wouldn't have been so great. But the fact that he's come back to Nordavind, and Nordavind are still one of the higher end teams in the NLC, makes that move look really good. Yeah,
showed that it worked, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It became what they wanted, and they've stuck to him now. So yeah, I mean, I agree.
Yeah. I think at this point we can sort of transition a bit and kind of started to touch on it there. Obviously, your new role as an agent with ICM Stellar. To start with, I just wondered kind of how that even happened. Was that something that you sort of consciously thought you wanted to move away from coaching, or was it just an opportunity that came around at the right time?
It was a completely ad hoc opportunity, to be honest. My eyes were still set on coaching. I was in no doubt demoralized by the whole Munster fiasco of last year. So I had the LEC. I didn't get much go my way after. I mean, to be honest, being completely transparent here, I thought that after getting XL to the LEC and coaching the LEC for a split, even should that happen where we kind of like part ways after some things don't work out, that I would still be considered for lots of good ERL jobs. Turns out I wasn't. Turns out I didn't really get many of those opportunities go my way. The Munster thing came up. I was really, really excited about the Munster thing. I was given a budget. I built the roster. I got Maxler on board. I got Heaver on board. I convinced these players to play in the NLC for a team that had never existed before, or was effectively Feeling Gaming. I convinced Maxwell to join Feeling Gaming. So that in itself is like a career achievement, I think. But
that has to be on the CV.
That's what ICM Stellar saw, and they thought, wow.
And I mean, Maxwell was like a god. Like, honestly, this guy is so good. Like, whatever anyone's, and again, talking about context, right? Like, these players that played at Munster, I felt just about as when I was talking about Kasing being dropped to the UKXL team during our LEC split. I had the same thing the next year because everyone is there slagging off Heaver, saying, "Oh, look how bad a split he's having. Oh, Max Law's washed up, isn't he? He can't play in the LEC." The guy's like, he's working for a charity right now. You know what I mean? Like, he's doing it. He's given his own time every single day without a penny going into his bank to work for Feeling Gaming. You know, he's got nothing to prove. He's been to Worlds quarterfinals or whatever against SKT. What has he got to prove in the NLC? But basically, I gave the option. I said to the team, look, if this is going to happen, you don't need to play. You can just walk away if you want to and sit out of the league. And the NLC DreamHack will have to deal with having a team less. And the team said, no, we all want to get better together. We all want to become a better team. We all want to work with each other. I don't care about the org. I'm not going to represent the org in a positive light, but we want to work for each other. We've put a lot of hours in to try and get better as a team, so we're going to do that. And ultimately, I think that the motivation did dwindle at a lot of points when it should have been kind of kept up by the promises that the players were given, and that occurred. So exactly the same for the players has kind of happened for me, and I felt that the Munster project, with that level of funding, with that level of resources, with what Munster wanted to build and bring it into the traditional sports kind of remit and link together with their rugby club side of things, I felt was a really good project. It turned out not to be that way, and we all know the kind of ins and outs of a lot of that. From that, I didn't know where the next. A couple of things, right? I was disheartened by this Munster stuff. The coaching landscape at an ERL level is very short term in its nature. It's very much, here's a one split contract, see what you can do, and we might give you another 6 months. I am 28 now and want to have a mortgage. I've got a girlfriend. I want a bit of an actual like human life. You know, I can't just be like every 6 months move to a different country and I mean, my contract's running out in 1 month or whatever. I've got to still finish this split. I finished the split and I don't know where the next month's money is coming from, you know, or anything like this. Like, you have to set yourself up a little bit for the future. So I wanted something long term. Coaching was in my head that's what it would be. And I randomly almost got approached by ICM Stellar. I knew nothing about ICM Stellar at the time. Got to know them a little bit closer. They're the biggest football agency in the world, a huge sports agency in their own right. They've got like, they represent people like Gareth Bale, they represent Jack Grealish, they represent Mason Mount. They represent people like Beyonce and Samuel L. Jackson in the acting and music world. There's a huge amount of talent that they represent, and they're a real deal. They're not like a matey from university up the road's just started an esports agency and he's going to sign X support from the UKEL. You know what I mean? It's a legitimate business that's making money and is looking for people with my skill set. They didn't care that I had no agent experience. What they wanted was someone who knew what they were looking for in good upcoming League of Legends talent, you know. And that's always been a passion of mine, is identifying and then developing talent effectively at whatever level. And that's what they wanted out of me. They could watch 100 League of Legends games and have no idea who they should pick up and who they shouldn't, and who's going to make the LEC and who's not, or who can make the LCS and who's not. So that's the skill set that they wanted in me, and they could teach me the rest of the agency business. So that's where the transition came in, I guess. Yeah.
And then obviously since then you've picked up a few players, obviously a couple of UK names as well. I think noname was one of the first ones, and Soft, I think I remember as well.
Yeah, both of those. Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that something sort of like a conscious effort to pick up some UK players as well? Obviously being someone from the UK scene.
I mean, I've worked fairly closely with both. I did a stint on Feeling where Soft was the jungler. Munster Academy, noname was the jungler. Both of these players showed real promise to me, in various different ways. I think just the raw ability of both of them, I just felt needed a bit of nurturing, and they can actually become, both of them, I think, can become EU Masters level junglers. Whether they can do that in the confines of the UK scene with the academy teams in the situation it is, and the EU Master spots in the way it is. I mean, this is a slightly different topic, but part of this is where I think that lately I've become more of the increasing opinion that the academy should be a separate league that also has EU master spots. So the academy teams may represent a region within the academy league, but I think they may be actually it's almost its own ERL. The 10 academy teams or the LEC teams, and they play each other for, I don't know, 2 or 3 EU master spots rather than creating extremely top heavy ERLs where it is impossible for an upcoming organization to compete with anywhere near the resources of something like an XL or Fnatic. I mean, for instance, when Kasing dropped down to the XL roster, he was on an LEC contract playing in the UK. So I mean, you're talking thousands of pounds a month compared to players that are practicing part time,
Yeah.
living apart from each other, and maybe paid like a few £100. Like the difference is not slight. It's not like they're both full time, but he gets a little bit more than them. It's like this player gets 20 times more than anyone else in the league, and he gets to live and play League of Legends full time. Whereas matey over there goes to university full time, where he works in, I don't know, B&Q full time, while while being able to play a few scrims a couple of nights a week.
Yeah.
It's like your Sunday league team playing versus Man United almost. It's so it's such an unfair system, really, for those upcoming orgs to be able to ever compete, that it feels quite hard.
I guess to play devil's advocate to that, though, would you not think that because I've never actually thought of it that way, to further actually having it separately, because I think I'm so used to kind of ERLs being ERLs. But I think that, could you not also say that with the likes of some leagues developing and starting strengthening and gaining gaming houses and becoming kind of like, I look at even like Vodafone Giants. Yes, Vodafone Giants is probably the wrong example to kind of give, given their history, but kind of those kind of organizations are able to now kind of not compete exactly with the LEC teams, but at least with the academy teams, that as the league will develop, it will actually start to balance itself out, because we are seeing that with other leagues, just not really NLC.
I think where leagues have full-time League of Legends organization teams, so the LFL, some of the Prime League, most of the Superliga over in Spain, the level playing field is being able to commit to League of Legends full time, right? Because it doesn't matter if you're paid like an extra 10 grand than someone else, but you're playing the same amount as them, and actually you can develop at the same rate, providing that the infrastructure there. The issue comes when you're playing part-time players against full-time players. It's not necessarily the money; it's the resources and the lifestyle that they're given is the massive outlier to why some teams are much stronger. When the academy teams were introduced, pretty much all of the Superliga teams were already in gaming houses and playing full time, maybe barring like 1 or 2 teams like E-Monkeys, I think, were at the bottom, and they weren't doing that. Lots of the French teams had the same thing. The likes of LDLC had the same thing. But we introduced Fnatic and XL to a league that had never really had full time players, even let alone gaming houses and that kind of environment. And there are organizations that are moving in that direction. Do I think that investors in the UK would have been more willing to put more in sooner if there were EU master spots that these organizations could compete for? Probably, right? So
there's a third spot. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or if those teams are in their, say, XL and Fnatic are in their own academy league, there's 2 spots that NLC teams could put money into to be like, I don't know. Resolve are starting to get some sponsors, right? They announced skins, they announced Williams, Formula One link for a Rocket League team and such. If the hanging carrot for the people that are going to put the money into these teams is actually a bigger carrot, you know what I mean? That there's actually more willingness to want to do that. Right now, they're like, how much do we need to put in to get an EU master spot off of Fnatic and XL? You need to put in 200 grand. Okay, well, don't think we're going to do that, chaps. But we'll give it a go. We'll give you 4 grand. Like, and I mean, like, so it's trying to incentivize. There's almost a monopoly over money going into UK League of Legends for XL and Fnatic at present, right? Whereas I mean, there are some orgs doing great things, and I think Resolve is probably the outlier that's come through recently that's actually doing that kind of thing. But you saw M&M and Barrage, for instance, struggle for years, never getting next to no investment. And I mean, M&M and Barrage before Resolve were the 2 closest organizations to XL and Fnatic, if we're talking about UK organizations. And these organizations
had the lowest budgets.
they're paying on average, like we'll say again speculation, but they're paying less than £1,000 to a player per month, and in some cases even half of that or less. Versus, and these players are part time because that's all they can offer. So a player can't. You can't live full time on like 400 quid, or whatever. So the players had to be part time, and as a result, they need to get other jobs or other forms of income, or they're a student or whatever. But the ability to do that on that money, and you're competing against XL or Fnatic, who are all full-time EU Masters quality level players that have been attracted to their organization because it's got an LEC team, as well as they're being paid probably 5 times the amount of that, or upwards of 5 times the amount of that, and you get to live in a stadium in Twickenham with full-time resources playing League of Legends every day. It's not comparable, and that's part of the issue. I do think though, in leagues like the LFL in Spain and stuff, we're not seeing the academy teams win the league every split, and that's great, right? But the UK scene is not in that position at present, where the other organisations are anywhere near ready to compete with academy teams, unlike the orgs that were already in place pre-academy team time.
Just as like on a slightly different topic, one signing that ICM Stellar made recently that I think caught a few headlines was Dardoch, obviously the NA jungler, infamous NA jungler. He, I think, pretty soon after then, he's got like this new coaching role. Is it Immortals? I think that was with.
Yeah, so we did a great deal for him to become. It's interim, it's short term. At present, it's short term anyway, but it's to keep him in the loop, to keep him working hard, to keep him in the scene and not just like off doing his own thing, playing solo queue, and to keep him earning an income, right? Because he effectively he just was out without an income.
Yeah.
I mean, he was earning plenty, right, at previous teams in the LCS. That doesn't take any genius to work that one out. But he is all of a sudden without a job. So to keep him having a job, to keep him employed, to keep him in the loop, he's taken we did a good deal for him to become the assistant coach of Immortals in the interim. I think, yeah, I mean, it was I'd signed all potential EU Masters / like future LEC players up until that point, or that's kind of the aim. I am always looking at NA as well. We've got a lot. I mean, ICM Stellar has offices all over North America, and is well connected out there. So it makes sense that we look at that kind of player. Dardoch was very keen on having someone work with him to take his career to the next kind of level. I think some of his previous contracts have not been great in terms of the terms. I don't necessarily mean the money. I think he was probably for where he was performing comparatively to other junglers in the LCS, his salary was quite low. But it's other terms in contracts, right? That we kind of already touched on briefly. Stuff like termination clauses, stuff like how biased some certain contracts can be towards teams, and the freedom that they have to effectively make someone unemployed for free, not really causing them any issues at any point during any season. And I think Dardoch has definitely, touching on the kind of infamous side of Dardoch, I think he's definitely been immature at points and probably said the wrong thing at points, or given an outspoken response to certain things that his teammates have said. But I've spoke to him a lot, and I mean, he's been completely professional with me. And from a lot of the situations he's described, and again from his side of the story, so it's never a completely transparent picture, but from the kind of genuine response he's given to me, because I've asked him about various different issues, he feels that when a team in any shape or form speaks up or against staff or speaks up against teammates, you are toxic and you're causing a problem to the team, as opposed to, from his point of view, he felt in a lot of those cases that he was very much wanting the team to get better and was frustrated that the team was not getting better in as fast as they could, and he's trying to push other players to become better. Anyone who's seen something like The Last Dance, for instance, with Michael Jordan, he was such a horrible teammate, right? Like he would really berate other players who weren't working hard enough, as hard as he was, or performing as well as he was, in the hope that it would motivate them to actually like have healthy internal competition against each other to become better and better. And really, like, it's a nasty nature, but it's something you really need if you ever want to reach the top, is like this this, no matter what we're going to do, we're going to win. You know what I mean? No matter how many times we argue, we're going to win next game. We're going to be better today than we were yesterday. And that drive and determination, I think he's shown some of that, and I've seen some of that in him, and that's ultimately why I've chose to sign him to ICM Stellar, is that I see that he's not just like some immature child that doesn't care about winning and just wants to display toxic behavior. He's just very, very overtly competitive and always strives for people around him to be better. And that can sometimes come across as, I don't know, he upsets a few people doing that, I guess.
Straight up though, like why? So to the contract talk, why aren't compensation fees a thing in esports? Because obviously, like you would why aren't those a thing? Because that is like such a standard thing in like traditional sports.
Yeah,
if you were
I
to
mean,
terminate a contract, you'd be given this. It's why managers get like 4 million every time they get sacked after 6 months.
No, of course. And I mean, the honest answer to that is because the people that are signing the contracts are 18, 19-year-old kids who are just happy to be able to play games for a living, right? They get they get a contract presented in front of them, and that the important bits that they read is, okay, I'm going to make this much a month, and it's for 2 years or 1 year. That's the bits they really read. Like they look through it, they browse through the rest of the contract, and they're like, oh, I get a bit of holiday here in the off season. Okay, I'm going to sign. There you go. Great. Now I'm working for Fnatic, or I'm working for G2, or I'm working for XL. This is where agents come in, and this is where at present good agents have the most value to good players. Is that doesn't happen if you've got an agent, right? You don't just get sacked from a team. If your agent's any good, the teams can't just let you go and goodbye. You know, they can't. Obviously, there are still terms where that occurs, like we said before, like codes of conduct around like homophobia or racist or anything like that. Of course, if that happens, then you deserve to lose your job. But ultimately, there is compensate in a lot of the contracts that I'm signing. Any contracts that are more than one split deals, I'm ensuring that the players that I work with get compensated for being removed from a roster effectively.
Then I
It doesn't
suppose
even need to be a lot, does it? It just needs to. It's just that even
needs
that
to
thing,
tie you
that
over
knowledge.
until you get a new team, right? It needs to tie you over until you get a new team, so that you're not without income. Because when I don't know, if you're an LEC player and you're on, you're expected to earn 20k a month for the next 2 years, and you get 2 months in and you get the sack. Of course, you've made a lot of money, right? You've made like 40 grand, but minus high earner taxes, you've lost half of that to tax. So you've earned 20 grand. Okay, great. But you might not get a team for the rest of the year. So you've earned 40 grand, but that actually, like, maybe you blew a lot of that because your expected earnings are a lot. And I don't know, you bought yourself a new car, or you got yourself a really nice apartment or whatever. But that apartment contract is like the next 2 years, and you've only just got 2 months of that income, and now you're back onto zero income again. How are you paying the future months, you know? And it's really guarding the future and the longevity of your career.
Then just going back to the Dardoch topic, obviously the big question that everyone has then when they saw that he signed to a European a European agent, was the chances of seeing Dardoch in Europe. Because obviously being as like you said, it's maybe not like, it's not necessarily toxicity, it's just like he'll be honest, he'll tell people what he thinks. And I think the sentiment is that that's a bit more of like the way that teams would do it in Europe. Like famously, I think like Miffy, when he went over to NA, had said a similar thing, that like when he went over to North America, he couldn't just like communicate with his teammates the same way he could in Europe. Is that something
No, I mean, I completely agree. I think I've spoken to Dardoch about this. He is very interested in coming to Europe, for sure. He would be more than willing to prove himself at a good level ERL team. He'll take obviously a massive salary cut on any kind of LCS paycheck to play in ERL. He would do that. He'd play in an LEC academy team. It should the right opportunity arise. Really, it's about looking at what the right fit is for him and the chances of progression. I think he doesn't want to be in an ERL. He doesn't want to be playing at like NA Academy, because I think he's done enough in his career play wise to warrant something a bit better than that. But he's aware that stigma follows that kind of the dismissals alone that he's had from various teams, that there's a stigma that goes with that, and to get away from that, the proof has to be in the pudding, really. So he will be open as of the end of like this summer split to look at what and entertain what offers come his way from both Europe and North America, really. Yeah.
Very interesting.
I mean, it took Senkuk, just as another example, it took Senkuk to change his name for people to be like, this is a great player. Like, it's
This is
unbelievable.
honestly like a massively underutilized tool because of the way League of Legends currently is. Like, you see a player drop down from the LEC or the LCS, and the label becomes washed up, you know. But ultimately, if they change name and they cleanse themselves from all these stigmas that have come before, then they can start playing again, and they're not that person anymore, you know. Like the likes of Maxwell, the likes of Kasing, the likes of Memento. There's going to be an increasing list every single split that the players drop out of the LEC, right? Unless the LEC becomes like a 20-team league, which in my eyes I think it probably should be in the long term. There's going to be an increasing list of these players that were once there that are now not, and some of them will be because their level of play declined. Some of them will be because they didn't, whatever the current situation was, didn't work for them. The Misfits roster that Maxor effectively had his LEC demise from was a roster with Gorilla, Soaz, Hansama, Febivan, and himself, and that roster it failed effectively. Whatever way you want to look at it, it failed. But is that because Maxwell's washed up? Absolutely not in any stretch of the imagination. I think now I've got a player over in Maxwell's team now over in Movie Star Riders, Venza, and he's been very very impressed with Maxwell, and they're pushing now to try and get back at the top spot of Superliga. So I think it's really sad that because a player's been seen in the top level and he's not there now, to think that he was at his best then and now he can't, he can never get any better than when you were there. I mean, I coached, I don't know how many splits I've coached in the UKLC and NLC and all the way back to the ESL Premiership, like 2014 or something. I was coaching the UK, and I think my worst split was in the LEC. And that's my personal opinion. I coach worse in that league than at that time with that roster, with that predicament, than I did in previous splits. But that doesn't mean that if I ever went back to the LEC as a coach, that I would then be worse than I was there before, or because I dropped down to the NLC to coach Munster with Maxor and Heaver, that I'm a worse coach at that point than I was in the LEC. Because I actually think I was better coach in the NLC with Munster than I was with the XL in the LEC, for instance. So yeah, I mean, it's a very, very one-track mind of way of looking at players and their growth, I think.
Definitely.
In Maxwell's 25, like he's not 35 as well, isn't it? So expect a player to not be able to still develop at that age, whatever it is ridiculous.
I think that just these players, you experiences just allow you to learn new things, right? And that's just the way it is. Like, I mean, what Max Law went through on that Misfits roster that failed will teach him a lesson for the next split and future splits if he channels that in the right way. And that's just the way people grow and the way we develop is we take our experiences and learn from them. You know, it's really only motivation that I think makes players washed up. If they don't have the motivation to actually continue to compete at the highest level, then if that motivation is no longer there, then yeah, of course, your ability will decline. But ultimately, if that motivation, that underlying motivation is still there, there is no reason why any player that's ever played in the LEC or LCS can't either be there again or play better than they did before. You know,
I think especially with like a role of like the jungle where it is just so much like cerebral, and you see a lot of like Yankos, a perfect example, like junglers that can get into like the later years of what's seen as like an esports pro, because you are just constantly learning new things. And really, for a jungler, you should, like I say, if it's like mainly like a mental role, really like towards the end of your career, you should be at your best because you're constantly going to be learning more, and you'll learn new things to apply. I suppose maybe like meta shifts is like the only thing that would really change that too much, unless your mechanics literally drop off a cliff.
Yeah, I think in the current state of the leagues and such, sometimes there is a motivation thing, right? I think if you've been in the LEC for the last 7 years and you feel like it's almost a given you're going to be there next split, but you never actually win it. You make playoffs sometimes, you don't quite make playoffs other times, and that kind of stagnant feeling that you're just like not really getting any further than you did last year. Like your aim is always to push further, and you're not really getting anywhere. Then I think there can be a stagnation of motivation a little bit, and it feels like I'm not doing anything here. I'm just doing the same. I'm just like rinse and repeating, whereas it doesn't feel fresh and energized. And I think that's what you get when you bring in hungry players to LEC rosters like the Marcoons and Avians of the world. It's not even necessarily that they're just they can click their Q button much faster than Dan can or anything like this. It's really like, it's the energy that you bring, right? And winning breeds winning. They're so used to winning in the NLC that they truly go into games thinking they're going to win every game. Whereas XL, I can tell you, XL's LEC roster pre that swap didn't think that they would go into every game winning the next game, whereas they truly believe that I don't care, it's G2. Like, I'm so motivated and keen to be here that I'm going to show what I can do in front of X thousands of people, that that motivation is the key to like real success and really like bringing other people around them. I mean, the whole Nuke Duck story is another thing that's like shows differences between motivation and personal situation and stuff, as to how a player could just have an awful split but then actually still be the player he once was when he was he was in the final in the LEC in spring 2019 versus G2. So
I think the McCoon one was actually quite good, because when they had him on, and I respect the LEC for actually having him on straight away in, I think it was like PGL in the first game, and they kind of talked about that, and they said, like, what's the difference between like NLC and LEC? And he kind of said, NLC, they basically just essentially, what he's paraphrasing, but lied down and he got to do whatever he wants. Where now he's being challenged, he feels like a fire. He feels like he's getting challenged. He's having to think a lot more. But he's also kept that aggressive play style to go in, and it kind of, I guess, shows the benefit of having these players in the academy get kind of that mentality, find a style that works for them, and as long as they then implement that in the LEC, like, because sometimes, I do have to say, sometimes you bring a player in who's very aggressive, and then you're like, right, you're playing our style. That's not how it should work. You should kind of do it their style as well.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, like, you can't bring a 5-foot striker into that's rapid to play for your football team and then say, well, you're going to win every header from each corner, aren't you? Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't work like that. You have certain skills. Each player has their own skill set. They can, of course, work on their weaknesses, and they can, of course, develop their strengths. But the reason they get to the point where they're at is because they've effectively used their strengths to win games before. And going completely against what you've got in front of you and just playing to weaknesses, for instance, doesn't allow anyone to fulfill their potential, basically.
Right. At this point, obviously, we're going a fair bit over an hour now, so I think we'll move into some predictions before we come to start wrapping things up. I think it's actually we'll do some NLC predictions. I think it's a super week actually. So what I've done, I've just pulled off a few games for us. We can maybe talk about on stream, and then we can sort some other ones out.
Let's just say I don't think we're going to get any of these right, because if anybody has been watching the NLC, it has been absolutely mental with some of these results which have come
and
through.
our predictions last week were just horrendous. I think there was
something that's so weird is like when good teams, so you get like the what should be stalwart wins, right? The nailed on, like the XL should win pretty much every game, and you can pretty much put a bet on them. When they start losing, the top teams in the other ERLs also seem to start losing as well. Like Carmine Corp all of a sudden just lost 2 games last week. They were like 7-0 or 9-0, and then they start losing as well. It's like the top team, UKAM as well, over in Spain. They were winning every game. I mean, they had a bit more of a real reason for it, because their support is subbed out for medical reasons, so they've changed a player. But like, it's a really weird trend how the top teams in the ERLs on 1 week, all of a sudden they all lose together.
Very odd. So we'll do our best then to get a few games this week. And I've just picked up a few for us to talk through on air. Now, weirdly enough, the first day only has 4 matches, and the rest of the second 2 days have 5 games, which are odd. But one that I pulled off for day 1 is Nordavind against Kova, mainly so we can touch on Nordavind to begin with, especially having a UK favourite in Kuros in the top lane. And to be fair, I'd kind of, obviously Nordavind's still well in the running for playoffs. They're basically a point off being, a game off being second. But maybe not sort of had as good a split as I would have expected. Like, they've just about got more wins and losses. And when we did like a tier list episode before the split started, a key thing for Nordavind was the fact that they're the same roster from spring, and that should have really helped them. They should have hit the ground running straight away, but they've kind of been similar to spring, I suppose, like a bit hit and miss, just about like on the upper levels at the moment. What do you think is not necessarily going wrong, but what they could kind of improve on?
I mean, I like Nordavind, but there's definitely consistency issues. I think I mean, something lots of coaches at an LEC level or whatever will look at when they're looking at an ERL team will be one, team fighting, and secondly, especially for the early game, the kind of the link up between mid and jungle. And I think perhaps mid and jungle is probably their weakest areas. And it makes it harder for them to consistently get the leads that they need to get for in the earlier stages of the game to actually go on and win games. I think Kerberos has always been a very inconsistent player. I actually really like Kerberos, and I think that when he gets the right conditions, he takes over games and makes it really, really hard for the opposing team to play games. But you sometimes don't know what Kerberos you're going to get, and I think that causes issues. I think they'll probably beat Kova as my prediction for this one. But I think, yeah, I mean, it's for me, inducing consistency in a team is all about really finding what your true identity is and what the strengths are of the team. And then no matter what happens, finding ways within the meta to stick to that identity. It's really easy to flip flop, like, oh, Ezreal's really broken on this patch, we're going to go away from these heavy dive comps because Ezreal's broken. But it's like we take Ezreal, but then we're still trying to kind of do something that Ezreal's not very good at, or whatever, for again an example. But it's really easy to go away from the team's identity to slot certain champions into drafts, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, the team actually doesn't really know what they're doing very well with the kind of tools that they've got. And games can slip away from you. So yeah, I mean, hopefully they find an identity, sharpen touch, play better together to facilitate their carries. And yeah, I mean, I still would put my edge of my bets on them beating Kova.
I think what you're saying about kind of like knowing like the essentially like the win condition and the person to rely on. It is Chrisberg. It's always been Chrisberg. It should be like, I love Kerberos in a team because I think he can be the X factor. But with that, you've got to have consistency, like you said, throughout the entirety of the team. You've got to be able to, where if Kerberos does have those kind of off games, that it isn't like heavily impactful to the rest of the team, where sometimes there is a bit too much of an over reliance on Kerberos being like, you've got to be the best player in this team right now. Where, and for me, I think Chrisberg is kind of the person you should really be putting that mantle on. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think this is. I was very confident about Nordavind, and then they lost to Godsent, and now I'm like, the 3 games in this Super Week are Kova, Riddle, and Galaxy Racer. So this is huge. This is a mega game for Nordavind. If they lose this game and then lose to one of Riddle or Galaxy Racer, that could genuinely just knock them out of even really being a contender, or it would have put the fate in their hands. So this is, I think, like a really big game. I do think that how far ahead am I on predictions?
You've got 50 points at the moment. Yeah. Guests are on 48, and I'm on 47.
Tactical voting now, is it?
Yeah, that's after week 1.
So I am gonna go for. Yeah, I'll go for Kova. Go on, I'll go for Kova, because as well, I think as well, like, this is also a very important game for Kova, because this is another game where you look at kind of Nordavind. They've kind of lost 2 games in a row. They said they've lost to Godsent, so to kind of balance that out, what Godsent or Kova, one of those two is definitely going to go down. So Kova will want to win this match if they want to try and even stay in the league. So it's, you've picked a match which actually, when I looked at it, I was like, why have you picked that game? But actually, the implications of this game are really huge in Group B.
Yeah, and I'll go tactical on the other end then for mine as well. I'll obviously go for Nordavind. It seems like the easier choice. But it's a good point that you said that, though, Josh, about like having a style, because it's something that, like, you often see it in, like, to compare it back to football. If you want to be like a top team competing, you've got to have a way that you play. Like, it's not really a thing these days, like in football at least, that top teams competing for titles are like that, like, pragmatic. They don't really set up every week based on the team they're playing against. They will have
They do what they do very well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do their one thing that they do brilliantly.
Yeah. So
But
like,
I think that you look at G2, like this is when it was Perks ADC G2. I think that that's why they G2 was so well, because they had a unique style and a unique kind of option that no one else had, in the sense of like when they got to play like the mid lanes in the bot lane, or
I
you know
tell
the
you, scrimming
Singularity.
against that team was
Yeah.
really disturbing. Like you would, I mean, I was trying to draft versus G2 in scrims, and you'd see like a Zoe picked, and you'd have no idea. I mean, I've seen Wonder play mid laners, top lane. They would play mid laners, top, mid, and AD carry. And AD carries in the mid lane and AD carries top lane. Like I saw Vayne top for Wonder, I saw Vayne mid for Caps, and you would just like, I mean, every pick was a flex pick almost. Became really, really impossible. And that I think probably then I realized that we're not going to be able to outdraft them in terms of like clarity. And there's one particular game where we XL in the first bit. I think it's like week 3 of XL in the LEC. Actually, we had a 8k goal lead against that G2, and should have gone in my eyes to go and win that game. And ultimately, what we did was we just picked a very clear strong side bot. We got Draven Morgana, I think, and we had like Sion Galio, and we just had one particular style. Going back to what we kind of segue back into what we're talking about, and we just tried to really nail on that one particular style to beat the opponent, regardless of what they did. And I think at an ERL level, become a master of something rather than a jack of all trades, or try to be a jack of all trades. Become a master of something, and you go much further.
and it could be the case that maybe it's tricky for Nordavind, like with having, well, like you said, Tom, like they look best really when they play through Chrisberg, but then you've got Kerberos on top that kind of prefers to have a bit of the focus, or at least be on the champions where he can like take over things himself. So maybe it's that plays into it a bit, and it is maybe difficult for them to work out one sort of clear way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think their historical success has been when, it's two ways, right? It's Kerberos draws so much pressure from the opposing team that it becomes unbearable, or Chrisberg gets so far ahead that he is like just 1v9 in team fights. But the point being here is that when Kerberos gets so far, like Kerberos is when you give resources to Kerberos, it's inconsistent as to whether the game is won or not. And if you give resources to Chrisberg, it's very common that the game is won when he actually gets those resources. But does Kerberos enough on the other side that it might not matter, you know? So it's hard. It's almost like a double resource side team, and at one point a player has to sacrifice. And I think probably they might have even found that at some points during the team building the team's identity, that Chrisberg has gone like, give the resources to Kerberos, because I'll probably still be able to carry without those resources in the later game team fights. And then they've tried that, and they've flitted between the two, and probably got a little bit lost at points between them. And I think stick to one and go with it. And I'd edge my bets on going Chrisberg and sticking him back on Cho'Gath every week.
Exactly. Moving on then, if we look ahead to day 2, one that I've picked out is Tricks against Singularity, which I think is a massive one for Group A. And obviously, quite unexpectedly, I'd say, both of those still at the moment ahead of XL. So you've got Singularity and Tricked as number 1 and 2 in the group right now. And Singularity really just like going from strength to strength from Spring as well. Another one that's kept their whole team together. And yeah,
they're the UK organisation, right? Yeah, they're the UK.
They are.
Yeah,
The
they
Dragdar
well
Prosper
yeah.
to rock.
Well, no, not when we saw Torok off in his Denmark shirt at Wembley, eh? But we'll
How
forget
vile.
that. But yeah, what do we reckon? I think that's going to be a pretty tasty one.
I think. Can I call him Fury? I'll call him Fury. It is quickly becoming one of the best mid laners in the league. Like, I mean, he's become really, really insane over the course of the duration. I didn't used to rate him very highly, in honesty, and maybe that was an oversight. I'm sure it was an oversight from me. But the more and more I see of him now, the better and better I think he is. Like, he impresses me every single week now. So I can't really look past them, to be honest. I think when he's becoming a real outlier against when he's playing against a lot of these other mid laners, and I think any team with Prosper is normally fairly solid on a macro basis. I think Dragdar is again. I think he's well worth his weight in gold within the LEC in the NLC. Sorry, I think he's he was perhaps someone who's a bit overlooked before as well. And I mean, I think because I mean, perhaps a lot of people overlooked some of these players right in the kind of inception of Singularity, and as a result, they probably didn't even have as much expectation on themselves as some of the the Nordavinds of the world that were expected to come in and stomp more games than they perhaps have. And I think that's played into their wheelhouse and allowed them to develop as a roster. But yeah, no, I mean, I think Singularity look really good.
Hmm.
I'm gonna have to go for Singularity as well. I think this is probably the best built team in actually. Look at now in hindsight, this team has been built so well. The team plays so well together. Dragdar and Prosper, I think, have looked even stronger than what they had previously done. It's all clicked for them now, and I do have to shout out like Nolte. Like for example, like I think I've openly said that I didn't think that Nolte was going to be the UK jungler in the NLC the split before. I thought Soft, why is Soft not there? You know, it should have been Soft over Nolte, and now seeing how he's kind of like come back after some like rough splits that he's really had, to actually have the performance now and to be the best group, best team in Group A, probably only like Fnatic Rising probably being the only better team for them in terms of performance right now, and that could even be contested I think at some points if Fnatic have been played. I think the whole team has looked really good. So so it's actually really weird because I feel like Tricked is a team which I think a lot of people also had a bit of doubts in. So both of these teams are actually doing really well, and it's nice to see a first and a second kind of not be an academy team. And if I
Yeah.
believe if Singularity win, this very much just puts them in first, unless like something drastic happens in like the last few games.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I can I can perhaps shed a little bit more light on Tricked as well, because obviously I worked with Taxa for a long
Mm.
time, and I mean, I think personally, I think he for the duration, he's probably done what Nolte does for Singularity, but better and probably at a slightly higher level. I just think his carries maybe not as consistent as Singularity's carries right now. So the facilitator is a role that is reliant on when you give resources to these people, that how well they use those resources. And Nolte, I guess what I was talking about before with Nordavind, the whole jungle support synergy. I think Prosper helps maneuver Nolte in the right way to
Hmm.
perform his role, and then Nolte gives the right. He's very much a facilitator to Fury Dragdar, and as a result, that team operates very smoothly. I think Tricked are again much more of a team in their inception. I really love Taxa. I think he's probably one of the hardest working players I've ever had, and where he again he got a bit of slander for not being a carry on XL or not doing. I mean, perhaps not having standout performances, but I knew what I was going to get from him mentality wise, performance wise, every single game. And that I could say, you're going to play Sejuani all week. And he'd be like, yeah, if that's for the best of the
Hmm.
team, I'm going to do that. I could say, you're going to play Lee Sin all week. And he'd also be able to perform on that. So very versatile, still definitely a better facilitator than a hard carry within any team,
Hmm.
but works so insanely hard. And I think with the experience that he's gained over the time on XL, can go into any ERL team and do a really good job for them.
And he did it
Um,
with Makers. Like, look where
yeah,
Makers are now, for example. But Makers obviously made it to like the quarterfinals at the EU
Managing
Masters.
Masters. Yeah, and that's where it becomes really good for players like Taxers. They don't get the credit they deserve necessarily when they're on a top roster with stars. They get the credit when they actually are on a roster that probably shouldn't do so well when they go on and do brilliant, because that's when you see the impact of some of these players. I also signed Madley as Madley's agent, the Trick top laner, and I was really impressed with him throughout the start of the split. He's been put on a lot of karma duty and stuff lately, but on some of the more kind of bruiser type carry orientated champs throughout the first weeks of the split, I was very impressed, and I watched a lot of his gameplay, even pre-tricked, and had a look back, and again, very impressed with him and his mentality as well. So I think that there's a lot about this team to like. I just think Singularity at present is a more complete package.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I'd give it Singularity as well. Like you say, just have been the real deal, really, the whole package so far. And I like to see the Torok Kiao duo doing good as well. Both of them have been on the podcast a number of times before, and yeah, just like to see him doing good, really.
Yeah.
Um, Looking across then to the last day, we've got one game for Group A. That's a big one for the relegation battle. So you've got Resolve against Dusty. who obviously Resolve just about ahead at the moment after that win. I think it was against Excel, wasn't it? They won last week, which was obviously itself quite unexpected. A team that I suppose has underperformed so far. I think wasn't someone we'd maybe tipped for like guaranteed playoffs, but not someone you'd have thought would struggle as much as they have, given some of the players they got. So yeah, it's going to be a massive one. I would see them winning against Excel coming into like the last couple of weeks before that. It should be a massive confidence boost for them. I'd be surprised if Dusty were able to beat them, but then again, Dusty have had their own upsets as well, so it's a bit of a tough one, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dusty, some of the players are a product of good growth that they had last split on Godsent. I think Zombie and M-Test were developed massively last split when they were on Godsent, and I was closer to that team than I ever planned to be, because I'm super good friends with John Ellis, who was their coach last split, and he was very impressed by a lot of the players on that roster. And M-Test and Zombie were definitely two of those players. And you think of someone like M-Test as someone who's been around a long time within the scene, but John talking to me about it, I just felt like he was almost like a rookie in there was still a huge amount to learn about the game at a higher level, that even though he'd been around ERLs for several years, that there was a huge amount that he could get from him, when you would have thought he would have known a lot of that already. But it seems that actually there's players like that are almost in the early stages of learning the game to a higher level, even though they've been playing in top ERLs for a long time, and I guess relying more on mechanical ability than knowledge of certain nuanced concepts in the game. So I've been impressed. And I've worked with I worked with Sawyer back in Phelan days as well, and I mean, he's a very interesting guy. I think mechanically absolutely brilliant, is a brilliant at finding early game opportunities within games to get leads. He's super aggressive. Will play aggressive against anyone in the league. Doesn't care about that. I think sometimes he could be perhaps a little bit single track minded, or about the way he sees the game. But often, I mean, good players can often become like that. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's plenty about this Dusty roster. It's really weird. I think XL are almost kind of sacking their NLC split. They don't care about the NLC. That's wrong to say. They do care about the NLC. That their season was built on the premise of going one step further than they went in Spring EU Masters, and that's changed because of the LEC team, right? What the LEC team's predicament has sacrificed the growth of the BTXL for this split for the most part. I don't know what Dan and Denick will do long term, whether there'll be a chance that they ever make it back in. The way XL currently are playing in the LEC, then I think unlikely. But it can change in the drop of a hat. So it's really about the mindset that Denick and Dan are in. Are they in a very negative mindset that's bringing the other players that were trying to push for a good EU Masters run down to a negative, or are they really gelling back into, I'm going to show the LEC team why we need to be back there? And really, like, because I mean, look at the tools they've got. They've got a Rome, Dan, Denick, and then they've got Deadly and Hatrix. I mean, roster wise on paper, that's an insane roster, but it's not necessarily about the 5 individual parts. It's about how those 5, it's the links between those 5 parts all pushing for the same goal. And it really, for me, this is a motivation built remainder of the season for BTXL, and that will determine absolutely how they get on.
I think, yeah, going into the Dusty BTXL game then for a little bit as well. I think that what's really important is the fact of the matter is that BTXL have, lost the last 3 games. It's not like they're even coming in and they've kind of won the 3 games. So obviously they've had like the little bit of the changes which have kind of happened to kind of implement everything like that. But this BTXL and Dusty are 2 teams on just terrible form right now, which sounds really weird to see both these
XL are
sides
playing
together.
Granite, actually. That's the next one I had on my
Oh,
list
is
as
it?
well.
Oh, I thought we were on about Wednesday with Dusty BT.
Oh, right. No, so because we're saying because Resolve beat XL. I think that's how we've got onto
Oh,
the XL
sorry.
topic.
Oh, that was
Okay.
my mistake.
That's fine.
Well,
So
okay, so talk about Resolve Dusty. They are all right. really like Resolve. I really like Resolve, but there is some the British irony in me is like, imagine if they got relegated after buying a spot from Barrage and stuff like that. That's just the British like dark humor, I think there. But
Yeah.
I really want Resolve to do really well. I want Resolve to to beat Dusty, obviously being like slightly biased. But at the end of the day, is I think that uh, Resolve won the last two games. Dusty have lost their last two games. Like Dusty obviously have had their upsets, but it's a little bit too late for Resolve. Well, it is too late for Resolve. The top three have actually already been confirmed, but it's a little bit too late for Resolve. But I think you want to finish on a high. You want to kind of at least secure your chance to stay in the NLC and then perhaps see what worked, see what didn't work, develop from that. So I do see Resolve beating Dusty. I think that Dusty, while I like some of the players involved, I do feel like they are one of like the least performing teams out of the lot of the remaining teams there. Perhaps maybe them and Godsent really, because I do think that Group B has been quite competitive. Really, it's really difficult to kind of see with the two, but I do think that Resolve do actually have it in to hopefully get a win and to to kind of basically cement their place in the league.
Yeah.
I think Resolver look like a different team since the support change as well. I think that this guy coming in is so impressive. FGG, is it? I
Yes.
mean, that guy on that Rakan game last week looked like he had been playing that level for a long time, and it wasn't. So when I spoke earlier about kind of Prosper and Nolty, and perhaps Nolty leaning on Prosper's experience a little bit to make sure he's in the right place at the right time and facilitate the team, this wasn't that at all. This was FGG going, okay, I'm going to take the game by the scruff of the neck, and I'm going to actually make proactive plays myself that are going to lead, because nobody can tell as a champ, that as a player that will engage and start fights, it's on you to be able to see that, and you see these split-second moments and you do that yourself. Nobody tells you like you need to engage here, and I mean, whenever that occurs in teams, it's often like it looks like a really poor delayed scruffed forced engage that that really doesn't often end up very well. So by watching that game, I could tell that this guy was very impressive. And I mean, they've got the raw talent in that team amongst Achu and Sof, especially in my eyes. Calum is a little bit more of a kind of a lesser known quantity, I think, in at the level. But I think Sof and Achu have consistently been top end playoff contenders in whatever team that they've been on before. So I know I like Resolve. I think as an organization, they've got huge, lofty ambitions to be right up there at the top end of any org outside the academies, and even compete with the academies in the longer term. I don't think that needs to be their first split in the NLC, and I think that's fine for it not to be. But they absolutely need to stay in the league and cement themselves there if they want to build long term. They want to build on this foundation of where they're at right now, take it to the next level, split by split, to the point where they really are an EU Masters type contender, should they want to put that level of resources in that they seem to want to.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, obviously, it highlights the level of skill that we are starting to see as well from the UK scene. Obviously, we are hosted by the UKL, but we've not been told. We never get told to talk really about it too much, But like FGG was in the UKEL 2021 spring promotion tournament, So he obviously then Resolve Academy went to the UKLC and all that, but like the theory was is that he was going to be playing into the third tier if that Resolve thing didn't happen. And you have a look at a player like Dragdar as well, who was playing UKEL, then went straight up to the NLC. So there is talent which is starting to be developed, or even kind of come back down in the case of Dragdar to develop back up, or FGG, who's, like you said, just kind of come out of nowhere and looks like a complete different player and has changed the team.
Yeah, for sure.
And it is like, I suppose out of the NLC split so far, I'm pretty sure this is one with by far the most UK talent. And I don't think any of them are in teams that are at least right now in relegation spots as well. So at least it shows that they are of the NLC level, and yeah, hopefully it continues.
Yeah.
The last game
sure.
I had then was BTXL, so we've covered a bit now, against Granite, mainly so we have an excuse to talk about BTXL's team. But yeah, obviously, it is the change up of having Dan and Dennett come down clearly has had an effect, and it's like you were saying earlier, I guess, Josh, when a player gets demoted, it's maybe not to the same level as Kasing having to get a flight back to London, but
Sure.
it's like that kind of mental thing of like they don't really want to be playing there, and I suppose that could make it difficult to stay motivated in a sense. Could it? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think this BTXL has been building since January to try and get to a point where they weren't. That it was a given that they were going to win or minimum come second in NLC, and it wasn't necessarily about how their NLC games went. It was about being a stronger team to compete at EU Masters. They went on and come second. I think while Carmine Corp showed some kind of fragility in trying to finish out some of the games that XL held on to and then actually went on when they looked like a significantly worse team probably than Carmine Corp over the course of the tournament. So this split was about, let's get back to EU Masters and prove that we've worked on the things that are now going to work at EU Masters, not just going to work on a kind of regional level against the other lesser NLC teams perhaps. And that plan has been completely scrapped, right? So that plan's completely gone out the window. Like I said before, and mentioned multiple times in this podcast, there's a huge amount to say about the synergy between support and jungle for the strengths of a team in the early game, and they've just lost that part of their team, and they've brought in a new part. It's ripping out your engine of your car and putting in a new engine, and hoping the car runs the same, and sometimes it runs better, sometimes it runs worse. I don't think that this means that Dan and Denick are worse than Marcoon and Advian, but it means there's a different dynamic amongst the team in which the way it now runs. It will take some time. That time that it takes for me is dependent on it takes time to dependent on the motivation that Dan and Denick have to really want to show that they want to be back in the LEC. Right? I mean, these players are more than capable of dominating the NLC and going on to EU Masters. They've both done it on different rosters with different teams at different times before. There is no doubt in the capability. What is doubted is whether they have the motivation after dropping down to the LEC to the NLC. And a bit like we were saying about the Xing thing, that I don't know their exact situation currently in NXL, but it wouldn't surprise me if they've flown back to the UK from the Berlin house and are now playing from the UK. So obviously they flew together, so it's not quite as bad as flying on your own and packing your bags. But I mean, it's the same principle. You go down those stairs out of that Berlin gaming house, and you're going to an awful Berlin airport, because the airports in Berlin seem to be really tragic, and the flights are always delayed. But they come back to Twickenham, and they're now in a completely different environment. They've moved into a different accommodation. They've moved all their stuff. They're playing at a different PC. They're playing with different people. They were perhaps relying on skills of others within the LEC to do things, and they need to find their own way to fit into a new team in the middle of a season when other teams have already been doing this. So it's really tough. I think they'll probably still scrape through. They've got the talent to probably scrape through this season and maybe still make EU Masters. Do I think they'll be on the level of the Advian Marcoon BTXL roster even by the end of EU Masters? In my eyes, probably not. But I think they'll do enough to scrape through the NLC.
And I think anyway, like if you think XL, their end goal for BTXL would have been to win EU Masters, but then you think at the end of the day, what is the benefit of the org for winning EU Masters? It's so that you've got players that you can then promote up to the LEC. So if there's two players on their roster that they thought were ready to promote, and they promoted them and they've started really well, then obviously it doesn't help BTXL's fortunes, but I suppose
the
that
other
is
business,
goal.
the other benefit would be a business model of being able to sell these players for a value. I mean, the likes of Dan and Denick, again, I haven't checked the global contract database on these, but likelihood is 2 years. So the likelihood is that their contracts end at the end of 2023. So I mean, they're paying these players an LEC wage, right, at present, which is it's breaking the bank for an. I mean, the investors have enough money, right, to not worry too much, but no business model works off of just like losing money freely. So if you're talking about the business side of XL right now, it does not make sense to pay an LEC wage to an NLC player. Because I mean, anybody who knows the LEC, the minimum wage that you can be paid is like 60,000 euros a year or something if you're on an LEC contract. So likelihood is that they're on probably double that or whatever. Again, speculation completely from my side, so I don't know exactly how much they're on. But either way, it doesn't make sense to be paying those kind of players. So if it's not to promote them back up and win, it's really to get a market value out of them, that another LEC team, LEC Academy team, whatever, wants a new support, so they'll pay they'll reach a negotiation on a buyout for Denick, or they'll reach a negotiation on a buyout for Dan, and try and get him off the books and actually give Dan another opportunity at making the LEC or whatever, if their goal is not to promote them. I'm sure if Dan and Denick went on and won EU Masters, and Advien and Marcoon have a couple of off weeks, that there would be a consideration to actually like, okay, right now Marcoon and Advien are the better players, but is that the case in if the character is shown amongst these players to really grind this team back together to the point where they go on and win EU Masters, I think you turn enough heads to consider that option.
Mm-hmm. What are you saying about the contracts then? Like that, because see, the LEC has like the kind of like stipend thing. You have to, have to pay a certain amount.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work then when a player gets promoted up? So like Marcoon and Advien that started in the NLC presumably wouldn't have had to be on quite as much money.
Yeah, I mean, I think case by case it's a bit different. In the first split of the LEC, what happened is you had to have 5 players contracted to the organization that were on LEC contracts. Didn't mean they needed to play in the LEC that split. So you could have the 5 academy players playing on academy contracts, and there's 5 LEC players, LEC contracted players playing in the NLC. That was the ruling then. I don't know exactly how that's changed. It would make sense to me that when these contracts are signed with the LEC teams, that there is that the players are aware that there is kind of promotion demotion clauses, that if you're playing for the main team, your salary is X, and if you're demoted for at any point during the academy, your net, you finish that month on that salary, but the following months are under Y salary, whatever the academy salary agreed would be. I mean, kind of doesn't make sense. I mean, it does make sense. It's a hard one, isn't it? Because you sign a player based on how good they are, not necessarily like how the league that you're putting them in part way through the split. So you're signing a player saying he's worth 20 grand a month or whatever, and that doesn't really change what league he's playing in, just because he might have, it doesn't fit your team particularly. So it's kind of unfair for the player to lose. I mean, if a player was on 20 grand, he's probably gone down to like 3 grand to play in the academy for that much. And I mean, 3 grand a month for your average person is quite a lot, but when you're on 20 grand to go down to 3 grand, you're not even getting 25% of what your previous salary was. So yeah, I don't know how other different teams are overcoming this at the moment, the kind of promotion relegation thing. I think like the promotion relegation between teams thing. But yeah, I mean that's how it worked definitely in the first splits of the LEC, is that you had to have 5 players contracted on LEC regulated contracts effectively. They all have to be regulated, but you had to have the minimum 60k euros on any LEC player.
Fair enough. I think with that, it might be a good point to start wrapping up. This has been probably one of our longest ever episodes, I think.
I'm going with Granite to win, by the way.
Oh, right, yeah. I literally forgot we were doing that.
Oh,
I had Excel,
yeah,
unsurprisingly.
I think I'll go XL. I mean, we'll go XL.
Cool. So Tom's going to drop a couple of points to us then. Very nice.
Keep it interesting for the last week, you know.
Exactly, yeah. All right then, with that, just before we do wrap up, we can look ahead to what's coming up, obviously, here on the UKEL. If I just flick over to the fixtures for the coming week. So, yeah, back in action this Thursday then, starting at 6 p.m. with Demise against London Academy. And then we got Munster Rugby against X7. August, obviously formerly Nerd Rage, against Knox. And then London United against Lucendi. At the end, we can have a little look at what the standings are looking like now as well. And yeah, everything's kind of sort of shifted around over the last few weeks. August still at the top, but then the likes of X7 that had started quite strongly have just about slipped out of playoffs. Lucendi have kind of turned things around a little bit. They're only a win away from playoffs now as well. So with with a few games left to play, it's still all up for grabs. And obviously you can watch that all here on the UKEL. You can of course follow to see our future episodes too. We're usually live on Sunday afternoons. You can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you're watching this, maybe later on as well. And of course, you can follow us all directly on Twitter too, with those all on the screen. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thanks for joining us, Josh.
Thank you very much.
Like
No,
we
it's
said,
been plenty of fun.
yeah, sounds good. Like we said, it seems way overdue, and I'm sure it probably won't be a couple of years before we have you back on again.
No, anytime, honestly.
Good stuff. Right then, with that, that's pretty much it. So yeah, thanks for listening.